Hi, today we're going to look at how to find the slope of a line from a graph. So we're going to look at a bunch of graphs together, go through this, talk about it, and then you're going to try some on your own. Please have your guided notes out and take notes as we go along. Remember, you can always rewind and go over something again if you're confused or if you missed something. But let's start by looking at some notes with graphs. What we want to do when we find the slope, remember slope means essentially the same thing it means in real life. Slope is how slanted something is. And so we're going to look at this, and we want to get to the point where we can start by looking at this and know a couple of things. First of all, is it positive or negative slope? We already talked about that, so you should have some idea of that, and we'll talk about that more later. And secondly, as you practice these, you should get to the point where you have a little bit of an idea of the actual value of the slope. Is it greater than 1? Is it less than 1? Is it negative? Is it positive? And so we'll be paying attention to that as we go along. But let's look at this one. And what we want to do to start when we want to find the slope is we want to identify 2 points on the line that have integral coordinates. Integral. Let's go over that word again. Integral means having to do with integers. And remember, integers are whole numbers, but positive and negative whole numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0. Those are integers. So we don't want to be messing around with fractions when we choose points. Slope itself is usually written as a fraction. But when we choose points, we don't want fractions because they're very inexact. If you look here on this one, if I chose a point here, if I put a point right there, could you tell me what the coordinates of that point are? Not precisely. It's about 3.5, negative 1 and 2, I don't know. So I don't want to pick that point. I want to pick a point that's right on the crossbars of our coordinate grid. So that point there is very exact. It's at 3, negative 2. Or let's find one over here. This point, this is very exact. It's at negative 3, negative 6. So we want to pick a point with integral coordinates. They have to be integers. So let's look at some of those, and we'll plot some points, and we'll graph from there. So look on the graph for a second, see if you can identify a couple of points that would work out nicely. I'm going to choose 2 points on this line of my own. But remember, you do not have to choose those same points. You can choose whatever points you like as long as they're on the crossbars with integral coordinates. So I'm going to choose on this one. I like this point here. I'm going to mark a point, and this point here. You could have chosen other points. You'll still get the same answer. So I chose 2 points on the line, and now I'm going to find rise over run. So rise means how far up or down do we have to go? That's the Y direction. And run means how far left or right we have to go. That would be the X direction. Remember, this is the X axis, and this is the Y axis. The Y axis goes up and down. You can't see that on yours. Let me shift it down. And the X axis goes right and left. So first is rise, how far up? So I'm going to say, okay, I want to go from this bottom point, and I usually like to start at the bottom point. There's a reason for that, and I'll tell you about that later. And then I go up to the level of my other point. And then run is how far do I have to go across, right or left. So there's rise and run. My rise is a little cockeyed, but that's okay. And notice that we ended up constructing here, and you don't have to draw in this third side, but I want to just do it for emphasis. We ended up constructing a little triangle there. And that's going to work out really nicely for our rise and run, and for later on when we're doing lots of other things with points and triangles and so forth. So my rise is how far up did I go? So don't count the point itself. 1, 2. I went up 2. And remember, up is positive. And then I went over, don't count the corner. 1, 2, 3. So my rise over run is 2/3, and that's the slope of that line. And I got a positive 2/3 because I went up and to the right. But remember, we talked about slope before. And remember that as we read the line like we read text in a book from left to right, this line goes uphill, and therefore it's a positive slope. Okay, so let's look at this graph. You might notice right away this one goes the other direction, so we want to pay attention to that. I might even make a little note on this that this one is going to be negative, because sometimes we forget that. That's probably the most common error when people are finding slope on a line. So this is going to be a negative slope, but that should come out anyway. So let's look at this one, and again, pick any 2 points that would give us integral coordinates. And so I'm going to pick some points on here. You don't have to pick the same points I do, but let's say I like that point right there. And I'll pick this point right here. You could pick any 2 points you want. Now I'm going to count rise, which is how far up or down, and run, which is how far left or right. And again, I like to start at the lower point because then my rise is always positive and I don't have to worry about forgetting signs. So there's rise. How far did I have to go up? So run is how far we go to the left. There's my run. And again, you can see we made a triangle here when we count in the line. You don't have to draw in the third side, but it's a triangle. So now we count. How far up did I go? Don't count the dot itself. I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up. And what's the run? And write that right on the graph so you don't lose track. And the run is to the left. Don't count the corner. So count 1, 2, 3 to the left. So that would be -3. So I went up 6 and to the left 3. So my rise over run is 6 over -3. And I always want to simplify this if I can. So 6 divided by -3 is -2. So my slope of this line is -2. Now, I want to show you that if you had chosen other points, you still would have gotten the same answer. So let's look at this, and I'm going to get rid of some of the work I did here. And we'll go back and try it again. Let's say I picked some different points. So let's do a different one, and I'm going to choose some different points on this from the ones I picked before, just to show you we still would get the same slope. So let's pick this point way down here, and then this point way up here. And now I'm going to, again, do rise over run. So how far up do I have to go to get to the level of that other point? And how far sideways, left or right? In this case, I'm going left, which we know is a negative slope. That's a very wiggly line. Okay, so in this case, my rise is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Remember, I didn't count the point itself. And the run goes to the left, which means it's negative. Don't start at the corner. 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left is -4. So let's compare. Those aren't the same numbers I got the first time, but let's look at this. I got a rise of 8 and a run of -4. Well, what do you know? What's 8 divided by -4? It's also -2. So no matter how we did this, we still got the same slope. We got a slope of -2. Either way we did it. Now, let's try one more. Let's look at the one that's actually on your notes paper, and we'll kind of go through this one together, but first I wanted you to try it by yourself. So locate 2 points on this graph that are right at the intersection of the grid lines so we can get integral coordinates. Pick 2 points, mark them, count rise over run, simplify if you can. So take a minute, pause the video, do the work, and then when you're finished, come back and let's look at it and compare our answers. So pause the video now, do the work on your guided notes, and then come back when you're ready. Okay, so let's look at this and we'll count rise over run. And again, I'm going to pick 2 points. They don't have to be the same points you picked. It makes absolutely no difference. So I'm going to pick a point down here, right on the crossbars, and a point up here. Yours might be very different. Nobody cares. We better get the same answer at the end. So counting rise over run. Rise means how far up do we have to go? And run is how far over. And I'm noticing, by the way, I went up and to the right. Those are both positive. And the slope of this line should be positive because it goes up and to the right. So count my rise. 1, 2. Count my run. 1, 2, 3, 4. So my slope is 2 over 4 or 1/2. Remember that you did not have to have picked those 2 points, but you still should have gotten 1/2 for your slope. You might have, depending on where you picked points, you might have done 4, rise of 4 and a run of 8, or a rise of 3 and a run of 6, or even a rise of 1 and a run of 2. And can you see that those are all equivalent to 1/2? So no matter what points you pick, you should get the same slope. So use your notes, go back and rewind the video if that's helpful to you, and go ahead and do your work. You can do this. Good luck.